Today I'd like to share with you 7 big tips to help you minimize the voids in your HMOs. Hi there, my name is Tony Thor from Your First 4 Houses, and my channel is all about helping you achieve financial freedom through property. If this is your first time here, be sure to subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon so that you don't miss out on any of the free content that I give you each and every week. So this video is all about 7 tips to help minimize voids on your HMO, and I've broken it down into 2 sections. I want to look at firstly a couple of tips to do with before you buy the HMO, and then I've got 5 tips that are after you've bought it. So let's kick off with probably the biggest before, and that is when you're looking at HMO, you need to make sure that you're buying in the right location, and that has to start with demand. I personally believe that in certain parts of the country there is now a bit of an oversaturation of HMOs. I don't think that's any big news to anybody watching this, but I do genuinely believe, in fact I know, that in some parts of the country there is an under demand of HMOs. So you need to look for where the demand still lies, and I suggest that's where you should focus on buying that property. Now you can go onto Spare Room and you can look for properties that are available versus people that are tenants are actually looking for properties, and you'll get a bit of a ratio going on there, won't you? Well, then you can then do that in various areas around where you're thinking of investing, and you will probably find one location where there is clearly demand but not enough supply. That's where I would want to be focusing my attention. So looking at a bit more specifically at that location now, you want to be fairly close to the town centre. Not necessarily in the town centre, but maybe sort of 2 or 3 sort of stops, either on the train or on the bus outside of the town centre. Which brings me on to transport links. Transport links need to be really good. Are you on a main bus route? Are you on a tube, for example, if you're in London? Or on a mainline train station? Transport links into town are really important. You need to have local shops and facilities around you. So is there a kind of like a mini Tesco's or an off license or whatever it might be within easy walking distance from the property that you're looking at? I suggest there has to be, in my opinion. If it's a student let, are you actually in where the students want to be? Now you can establish this really quite easily by just going to speak to the local university and just asking to speak to the accommodations officer and asking, look, where are people wanting to stay? Maybe give them a map and say, here's a pen. Where should I actually be looking? Where do students want to go? Also, if you are a little bit further out, you want to be maybe 1 bus stop route away. You don't want to have sort of 2 changes if you're a student on a bus to get into the university. I suggest that's simply too far. So moving on to the next before, it's got to be the right property. So what do I mean by this? It's got to be modern, it's got to be clean. I like to think it needs to be a bit designery. It doesn't cost you much to put a bit of design flair into your property, and you've only got to look on some of the really good Facebook groups on Facebook now, and you'll see some really good examples of some awesomely designed and styled HMOs. Well, to get a bit of style in doesn't have to cost you big money. You want to use good quality furniture. Now there's lots of really good trade suppliers of HMO based furniture that's out there. Look for those, and they can put in really good quality furniture for very fair prices. You want good facilities, so sort of like washing machine and a washing machine and a separate dryer, I would suggest, rather than a washer dryer, in my opinion. Speaking as an old kitchen salesman. But also things like secure bike storage, for example. Make sure that those tenants have got really good facilities because you want them to stay for the long term. I always think you should have at least some social space. I always try to put a really decent sized loungy area in my kitchen and in my properties, and I try to make it maybe a kind of a combined kitchen, dinery, loungy area, but just make it feel like it's a really warm and inviting place to actually spend time. You also have to have awesome Wi-Fi. I think probably Wi-Fi is the biggest complaint that I tend to get. If the Wi-Fi drops down, everyone's on the phone. So let's look at now after you've bought that property. What can you do to minimize voids? Well, you've got the property now. So first things first, we're going to talk about the right tenant. So I would suggest that when you first start getting tenants into this property, there's lots of things you can do there, but I've done videos on that before. But let's imagine now you've got some tenants in the property. So you want to now start advertising early. So as soon as a tenant actually tells you that they're going to leave, start advertising straight away. And have really awesome adverts that shows the property at its real best. So when you first do this property up, you're going to want to get some really good video walkthroughs, ideally with a steady cam moving through the property, some really good photos. Get a professional in to do this. It's not going to cost you much. Maybe go to a university where there's a filmmaking component to a university. Get some of those students to come on over and, give them some beer money. They'll put something fantastic together for you, and it can be part of their portfolio for their university degree. When you start to get tenants inquiring, be fussy. I honestly think it's far better to have an empty room. I know this is about voids, but I think it's far better to have an empty room than a difficult tenant. Believe me, I've had a few difficult tenants in my time. An empty room is better than a difficult tenant, so be really fussy. And when you get on the viewing, spend real time with that tenant. I know some people sort of say that they can do the tenant viewing in a really tiny amount of time, but I like to actually spend a little bit of time with that tenant, make sure that I'm happy with them, answer any questions that they've got. But you want to start to get a real good feel after they start to let their guard down a little bit. You'll start to get a real good feel. Are they a good match? And the more time you actually spend with this tenant in that property, the better chance you're going to actually get to actually view whether they're going to be a good match. Are they a good match with the other tenants in terms of age, in terms of interests? This is so important. You can't put, I've got to be careful what I say here, you can't put a professional person in with, I would suggest, in with workers of certain types. I can't really phrase it any better than that. You've just got to make sure that they are comparable in terms of their interests and their age. And also, one of my properties is all girls in a house, and that is eight girls in one house, and that is an amazing pull for other girls because they want to be with other girls in their house. They're going to feel more relaxed, more at home. So the tenant that you're talking to, are they a good match? Make it clear you really value your tenants as well, is the other thing I would say to you here. I like to make sure that they know that they are effectively my customers. I might not use that phrase, but I want them to know that I do really value them as tenants, and I want to make sure that they know I'm going to really look after them, make sure that they're really happy. Let's move on to the right tenancy agreements. Whenever you get a tenancy agreement, well, first of all, consider a 12-month tenancy agreement rather than a 6-month. But what I think is really important, again, this is about minimizing voids, isn't it? Make sure that whatever you do, your tenancy agreement doesn't end on a December or January date, I would suggest. So if it looks like the 6-month tenancy bit is going to sort of end in the December-January period when you first sign them up, well, I would suggest sort of making sure that the tenancy ends around the February kind of time, because December and January, as I'm sure you're probably fully aware, are really the dead months for actually getting tenants in. So let's move on to the right price. So where are you in comparison to your competition? In a perfect world, you want to maybe be a few quid below your competition. However, it's perfectly okay to be higher than your competition in terms of price, as long as you're offering something exceptional. As long as people look at your property and they can go, well, actually they are more money, but hang on a second, they've included TVs in the room, or they've included Netflix as part of the package, or this property's got this, whereas this one hasn't, or maybe it's just in the photographs or the video walkthroughs. They can see that yours is just dramatically better, in which case it's okay to be higher. Don't automatically lower prices though. If you find that you've got voids, don't automatically lower your prices. I would suggest instead of lowering prices, you try to offer more. So maybe it is putting a TV in their room, although make sure that your tenancy agreement states quite clearly that the tenant is responsible for a TV license. Just make sure that's one of the things that's in your tenancy agreement. I'd also think very carefully before ever increasing the rent on a property. People often try to move their rent up each year, and certainly that's one of the things that I try to do. But before I move that rent up, I look very carefully at what the prices are, or what I'm considering putting it on the market for in comparison to other properties. So let's move on to the right service. I think you should have weekly cleaning in your HMOs, in the communal areas. It doesn't have to cost much at all. It's also great to get somebody in there as a cleaner who will also be monitoring the house. They'll look for cigarette ends in the garden. They'll get a sense of smells coming from the house. They'll look for just a general level of maintenance and upkeep in the social areas. And maybe one week it's brilliant, another week it's brilliant, another week it's brilliant, and then you come to a new tenant's moved in. Hang on a second, the communal area is a real mess. And a weekly cleaning kind of rota will start to pick this kind of thing up. I never forget, I had one tenant who was an amazing tenant, but then she left, and it was out of the blue. And I asked her, this is one of my little tips in a second, but I'm jumping ahead here. I asked her, I said, why are you not wanting to stay in the house? And her response was, well, the kitchen is always really gross. The worktops are sticky. And I couldn't believe it. I didn't know. Because at that time, on this particular property, we didn't have a weekly cleaning process. We had a kind of rota thing going on. So weekly cleaning is really good. I suggest that you pay for washing up liquid, you pay for bin bags, you pay for cleaning materials. This way, A, you know that stuff's on site, so they can't then say they haven't got it. And also it cuts down on any arguments as to who should be buying various bits and pieces. And it also means you're not going to get 7 bottles of washing up liquid next to the sink. I also think you should clean your ovens and also clean the fridges on a regular basis. I've got a contractor that comes on over and does that for me. It's amazing. It's like the oven's brand new by the time he's finished. But also I let the tenants know once a year that we're going to be cleaning out the fridges, for example. And so I ask them to minimise what they keep in that fridge. And this girl goes in and she empties the fridge out, puts it all carefully on the side, completely cleans the fridge out, and then puts what is left of the reduced foods, because the tenants have run the foods down a bit, she puts it back into the fridge. And tenants really appreciate that. If you walk around the property and there's some clothes on a radiator in the social area, or there's some shoes just by the TV, or maybe there's a box under the stairs, jump on it, because I think you've got a responsibility to make sure that your tenants, that you're looking after the whole of the house, all of the tenants in the house, not just one, all of them. And the thing is, if you've got, say, like 6 people living in a house and one person's being a bit of a pain in the backside, do you know what? The other 5 are probably not going to say anything. Because they've got to live with this individual, haven't they? So it's your job to jump on stuff, I would suggest. If there's ever a problem, respond really, really quickly, and also keep up to date with all of the maintenance on the property. I also think you should be checking in with your tenants on a fairly regular basis, not in an obtrusive way, but maybe just send them a text once every sort of 3-4 months, for example. Put it in your diary, just sort of check in with them and say, just sort of make sure you're okay with anything. If there's anything I can do to sort of help you, or if you've got any questions on anything, come back to me. And lastly, if they are going to leave, if they told you that they're going to leave, you need to understand why. Now, this can be such an insightful, is that insightful? Yeah, that's a word, isn't it? Such an insightful exercise. When that tenant has told you they're going to leave and you're doing the checkout and you're in the room, I always just sort of stop and I sort of say to them, I say, look, Dave, whoever it might be, Dave, listen, thank you. You've been an absolutely brilliant tenant. Do you know what? Could I ask a huge favour? You're leaving now, aren't you? You're moving on. That's brilliant, and I hope you're going to be really happy. Blah blah blah. Thank you for looking after the room. Blah blah blah. Can I just ask you, Dave? Can you tell me about the house? What is it that you've really found a bit challenging living here? I mean, are there one or is there a tenant that sort of all off the record, Dave? All off the record. What has been your real experience? And if you do it in this way, do you know what Dave will tell you? He's leaving now. He's got nothing to lose. The alternative is you use a questionnaire. And I know that's the way that most people do it. I'm not a big fan of that. I think it's great to be able to look that person in the eye and ask the question, what has been your real experience? And it's amazing. If you do that, you'd be quite surprised what someone comes up with. I had one tenant. Do you know what she said? Well, I said, come on, I said to her, if you had to change just one thing about your property, about your room rather, what would you change? And she said, well, do you know what? I've really enjoyed here. The only thing I've really enjoyed living here. One thing that's kind of been a little bit annoying is the toilet seat. Now the truth is, I had put into this particular HMO quite cheap toilet seats. Now you'd never get that up on a questionnaire, would you? By the way, kind of like the cheap flimsy plastic ones. But you know, I asked her, she gave me the information, and as a direct result of that, I changed all the toilet seats in all of the HMOs in that particular one. Maybe that's not a great example, but it gives you an indication of what can be pulled up. So you've always got to understand why a tenant is actually leaving, and that way it's going to help you to minimise your voids. I really hope you found that one helpful. For more tips and tricks like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and also while you're here, grab this 50-point checklist, which is going to really help you the next time you want to buy your own investment property. My name's Tony Law from Your First 4 Houses, with online training that helps build your property portfolio.